Rain hammered against the windows of the Onyx Room, Seoul's most exclusive underground club where power wore designer suits and secrets cost more than champagne. Neon lights bled through the glass, painting everything in shades of electric blue and blood red. Afrobeats pulsed through the speakers, a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat, primal and insistent. Zuri Adetokunbo stood at the bar, her reflection distorted in the mirrored wall behind the bottles. She barely recognized herself. Gone was the armor she usually wore, the sharp business suits, the cold expression, the untouchable aura of Chief Kola Adetokunbo's daughter. Tonight, she was someone else, someone softer, someone free. "Tonight, I'm not my father's daughter," she whispered to herself, her fingers tight around a glass of whiskey she hadn't touched. A voice came from behind her, smooth and dangerous like smoke curling through darkness. "Funny, because the way you're looking at me feels like destiny misbehaving." Zuri turned. The man standing there was tall, lean, with sharp features that could have been carved from marble. Korean, probably early 30s, wearing a black shirt rolled to his elbows, and an expression that suggested he was either extremely confident or extremely reckless. His dark eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You don't know me," Zuri said, her voice guarded despite the flutter in her chest. His smile was slow, deliberate, devastating. "Then stay. Let me learn you." She wore a borrowed name. He carried a hidden throne. Neither knew that by morning, bloodlines would collide, and two empires would begin their descent into war. Before this night destroys everything they know, subscribe to Oyonel Afro-Korean Romance and tell us where you're watching from, because what happens next will leave you breathless. 3 weeks earlier, Zuri had stood in her father's office in Lagos, listening to him issue orders like a general commanding troops. Chief Kola, Adetokunbo, was a man who'd built an empire from nothing, who'd clawed his way from the streets to the top of Nigeria's underworld through blood, cunning, and an absolute refusal to show weakness. "Seoul," he'd said, not looking up from the documents spread across his mahogany desk. "You'll go to Seoul as a business observer. Attend the meetings. Report back everything you see and hear." "I'm not a spy, father," Zuri had replied, though they both knew that was exactly what she was being asked to become. "You're whatever I need you to be." Chief Adetokunbo had finally looked at her then, his eyes hard as obsidian. "The Kang family controls the eastern shipping routes. We need access. They need our distribution networks. This alliance could make both families untouchable. Or it could destroy us if we show weakness." Zuri had understood perfectly. She was a pawn being moved across an international chessboard, her value measured only in strategic advantage. She'd been raised for this, taught to read contracts and body language with equal skill, trained to negotiate deals worth millions without flinching, groomed to be ruthless, unreadable, untouchable. But she'd never been taught how to be herself, how to want something beyond duty and loyalty, how to breathe without her father's hand around her throat. Seoul had felt like a cage from the moment she'd arrived. Business meetings that stretched for hours. Dinners with men who looked at her like she was a curiosity or a threat. Bodyguards shadowing her every move. She'd been in the city for 3 weeks and hadn't seen anything beyond hotel conference rooms and expensive restaurants where conversations happened in coded language. Until tonight. Until she'd slipped away from her security detail, changed into a simple black dress that didn't scream wealth, let her braids down instead of pinning them up, and walked into the Onyx Room pretending to be someone named Ari. Just Ari, a half-African art student studying in Seoul. Nobody important. Nobody hunted. And now this man was looking at her like she mattered for reasons that had nothing to do with her last name. "I'm Min-Jae," he said, extending his hand. Zuri hesitated only a second before taking it. His grip was firm, warm, and sent electricity racing up her arm. "Ari? Ari?" he repeated, like he was tasting the name. "Are you here alone?" "Is that a pickup line or a security assessment?" Min-Jae laughed, and the sound did something dangerous to Zuri's carefully constructed defenses. "Maybe both? This place isn't exactly safe for solo visitors. And yet here you are, approaching a stranger in the dark. Maybe I'm the dangerous one." "Maybe you are." His eyes never left hers. "But something tells me you're here for the same reason I am. Hiding from something. Looking for something. Maybe both." Zuri felt her pulse quicken. This was reckless. Stupid. Everything she'd been trained not to do. But God, she was so tired of being careful. So, exhausted from carrying the weight of her father's expectations and her family's legacy. "Buy me a drink?" she heard herself say. "Only if you promise to tell me at least one true thing about yourself tonight." "Just one? I'll take what I can get." They found a booth in the corner, away from the crush of bodies on the dance floor. The music was still loud enough that they had to lean close to hear each other, close enough that Zuri could smell his cologne, something clean and expensive, close enough to be dangerous. "One true thing," Min-Jae said, setting down 2 glasses of whiskey. "I'll go first. I hate this city sometimes. All the expectations, all the eyes watching, all the roles we have to play. Sometimes I just want to disappear." Zuri's chest tightened. "That's more than one thing." "Then you owe me more than one in return." She took a sip of whiskey, letting it burn down her throat, buying herself time. "I'm scared," she finally said. "All the time. Of failing, of disappointing people, of never being enough. I wear confidence like armor, but underneath, I'm terrified." Min-Jae's expression softened. "That's the most honest thing anyone said to me in months." Maybe we're both tired of lying. They talked for hours, about art and music, about feeling trapped in lives they hadn't chosen, about cultural differences and unexpected similarities. Min-Jae spoke perfect English with a slight British accent. He'd studied at Oxford, he explained. Business and international relations. Zuri found herself laughing at his dry observations about Korean corporate culture. Found herself sharing stories about growing up in Lagos that she'd never told anyone. Neither of them asked last names. Neither of them talked about family or business or the real reasons they were in Seoul. They existed in a bubble outside time and consequence. 2 people who'd found each other in the darkness and decided, just for tonight, to be real. "Dance with me," Min-Jae said when the music shifted to something slower, something that ached. Zuri let him lead her to the floor. His hand settled on her waist, warm through the thin fabric of her dress. Her hand rested on his shoulder, feeling the solid strength beneath his shirt. They moved together like they'd done this before, like their bodies recognized something their minds hadn't yet admitted. "What happens after tonight?" Zuri asked, her voice barely audible over the music. "I don't know," Min-Jae said honestly. "But right now, I don't care about after. Right now is enough." It should have been a red flag. It should have reminded Zuri that nothing good came from ignoring consequences. But instead, it felt like permission. Permission to want. Permission to take something for herself instead of always sacrificing for duty and family. When Min-Jae kissed her, it was soft at first, tentative, giving her space to pull away. But Zuri didn't pull away. She kissed him back with 4 weeks of loneliness and 28 years of hunger for something real, something chosen, something hers. They left the club together as rain continued to fall, getting into a cab that took them to a hotel that wasn't Zuri's, that wouldn't have her security waiting in the lobby. They stumbled into a room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering Seoul skyline, and for the first time in her life, Zuri let herself be vulnerable with someone who wasn't trying to use her for political advantage. Min-Jae touched her like she was precious, like she mattered beyond her utility. His hands were gentle as they traced the curve of her spine, as they tangled in her braids, as they mapped the topography of her body with reverence instead of entitlement. "Tell me to stop," he whispered against her throat. "Don't you dare," Zuri breathed back. They made love slowly, urgently, desperately, like two people who knew this was stolen time and wanted to memorize every second. Afterward, they lay tangled in expensive sheets, Zuri's head on Min-Jae's chest, listening to his heartbeat gradually slow. "I don't want this to end," she admitted in the darkness. Min-Jae's arms tightened around her. "Then let's not think about endings. Just this. Just now." But dawn came anyway, as it always does. Zuri woke to pale light filtering through the windows, and Min-Jae, already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "I have to go," she said, though everything in her wanted to stay. "I know." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "No numbers? No way to find each other again?" Zuri shook her head, fighting back tears she didn't fully understand. "It's better this way. Cleaner." "Nothing about this feels clean." But Min-Jae didn't argue. He kissed her one last time, soft and devastating, and let her go. Zuri dressed quickly, left the hotel, and made it back to her own room before her security detail realized she'd been gone. She showered, washing away the evidence of the night, and tried to convince herself it had been just a moment. Just a mistake. Just a beautiful, reckless mistake that didn't have to mean anything. They thought it was the end. It was only the ignition. 2 days later, Zuri sat in a conference room on the 45th floor of the Kang Consolidated building, reviewing contracts with her father's legal team via video call. Chief Adetokunbo had insisted on her attending today's meeting personally. "The new chairman is taking over operations," he'd said. "I need your read on him. Tell me if he's strong or if he's just riding his grandfather's reputation." Zuri had barely been listening. Her mind kept drifting back to the Onyx room, to Min-Jae's laugh, to the way he'd looked at her like she was a person instead of an asset. She'd been checking her phone obsessively, part of her hoping he'd somehow found her number, even though she knew that was impossible. The conference room doors opened. Zuri looked up, prepared to greet whoever was about to waste her afternoon with corporate posturing. Min-Jae walked in. The world tilted sideways. Zuri's breath caught in her throat. He was wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit now instead of the casual clothes from the club, his hair styled instead of slightly messy, his expression controlled and professional instead of warm and open. He stopped dead when he saw her. For 3 seconds, they just stared at each other while Zuri's mind tried desperately to process what was happening. "Miss Adetokunbo," one of the Korean executives said, gesturing to Min-Jae. "May I introduce Chairman Kang Min-Jae, the new CEO of Kang Consolidated." Chairman. Kang. The words penetrated Zuri's shock like bullets. Min-Jae recovered first, his face smoothing into a mask of polite professionalism that made him look like a stranger. "Miss Adetokunbo, it's a pleasure to meet you." He extended his hand for a formal handshake. Zuri's training kicked in automatically. She stood, took his hand, kept her expression neutral, even though her heart was trying to beat its way out of her chest. "Chairman Kang, the pleasure is mine." Their hands touched, and Zuri felt the same electricity as before. She saw Min-Jae's jaw tighten, saw the flash of something raw in his eyes before he shuttered it away. "Shall we begin?" he said, releasing her hand and moving to the head of the table. The meeting was torture. Zuri sat across from Min-Jae, watching him command the room with quiet authority, and felt her entire world crumbling. This was the enemy, the Kang family. The organization her father had been fighting with for control of Asian shipping routes for the past decade. The family her father had once tried to destroy. Zuri had been 12 when she'd overheard her father on the phone, ordering what she later understood was an assassination attempt on the previous Kang chairman. It had failed, but it had escalated the conflict to the point where both families had agreed to a fragile truce. A truce that could shatter at any moment if either side showed weakness or aggression. And she'd just slept with the new Kang chairman, the grandson of the man her father had tried to kill. When the meeting finally ended, Zuri gathered her documents with shaking hands. She needed to get out of this room, needed to think, needed to figure out what to do with this catastrophic information. Miss Adetokunbo. Min-Jae's voice stopped her at the door. A moment, please. The other executives filed out, leaving them alone. Zuri turned slowly, steeling herself. Ari, Min-Jae said quietly, and hearing the name she'd given him in his voice made her chest hurt. Don't call me that. Then what should I call you? The enemy's daughter? The woman who's probably been reporting our every move back to her father? I could say the same about you. Zuri's voice came out harder than she intended. Was that your play? Get me vulnerable? Get information? Min-Jae's face went cold. You know that's not what that was. Do I? Because right now, I don't know anything except that I just made the biggest mistake of my life. Is that what I am to you? A mistake? What else could you be? Zuri felt tears threatening and forced them back. She would not cry in front of him, would not show that kind of weakness. We're enemies, Min-Jae. Our families have been trying to destroy each other for years. That night was... It can't happen again. It can't be anything. It already is something. Then we'll make it nothing. Zuri straightened her spine, pulled on the armor she'd worn her entire life. This alliance between our families is too important. Too many people depend on it. So we'll both forget that night ever happened. We'll be professional. We'll do our jobs. And we'll never speak of this again. Min-Jae stared at her for a long moment, and Zuri saw something break in his expression. If that's what you want. It's what has to happen. That's not the same thing. Zuri left before she could do something stupid like admit he was right. She made it to the elevator, down to the lobby, out to the waiting car where her security waited. She gave them the address of her hotel and sat in the back seat with her hands clenched in her lap, fighting for control. Her phone rang. Her father. Report, Chief Adetokunbo said without preamble. Zuri took a breath, forced her voice steady. Chairman Kang is young but competent. He knows the business inside and out. He's not going to be easy to manipulate. I don't need easy. I need weak spots. Did you find any? Zuri closed her eyes, seeing Min-Jae's face when he'd looked at her in that conference room. Seeing the vulnerability he'd shown her in the darkness of that hotel room. She had found his weak spot. She was his weak spot, just as he was hers. No, she lied. No weak spots yet, but I'll keep looking. When she hung up, Zuri realized she'd just committed her first act of betrayal. Not against her family, against herself. The next 3 weeks were exquisite torture. The alliance negotiations required daily meetings between the Adetokunbo and Kang teams, which meant Zuri saw Min-Jae constantly. They maintained perfect professionalism in front of others, polite, distant, focused on business. But the tension between them was thick enough to choke on. Every meeting was an exercise in restraint. Zuri would present contract terms and catch Min-Jae's eyes on her, dark and intense. He would counter with his own proposals, and their fingers would brush as he passed her documents, sending electricity racing through her skin. They never touched more than necessary. Never spoke beyond what was required for business. It was killing them both. You look tired, her bodyguard Marcus commented one evening as they returned to her hotel. Zuri glanced at him in surprise. Marcus rarely spoke unless necessary. I'm fine. You're not sleeping. You barely eat. Whatever's bothering you? Nothing's bothering me. Zuri cut him off. I'm just focused on work. Marcus gave her a look that said he didn't believe her for a second, but knew better than to push. Your father called while you were in the meeting. He wants a video conference in an hour. Zuri nodded wearily. Her father called every day now, demanding updates, asking pointed questions about the Kang's operations, pushing for information she didn't have or didn't want to give. She was starting to realize that her father didn't want an alliance. time she'd spoken. "We're not finished." The two older people stared at each other across the table, and Zuri realized they'd planned this together. Somehow, impossibly, Chief Adetokunbo and Mrs. Kang had joined forces. "You think we didn't know?" Mrs. Kang said, looking between Min-Jae and Zuri. "You think we didn't notice you two sneaking around like foolish children? You've compromised everything." Zuri felt like she'd been punched. "Grandmother Kang, don't!" The old woman's voice was sharp as a blade. "You've betrayed your family, girl, just as he's betrayed his." "We haven't betrayed anyone," Min-Jae said, his voice hard. "And whatever's between Zuri and me has nothing to do with business." "Everything is business," Chief Adetokunbo roared, slamming his hand on the table. "Everything is family and loyalty and blood. You think you can just take my daughter like she's some common—" "Father, stop," Zuri said, standing. "I chose this. I chose him." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Chief Adetokunbo's face went darker. "You don't get to choose. You're my daughter. You do as you're told. I'm not a child anymore." "Then stop acting like one." Her father stood, towering over the table. "You will end this affair immediately. You will return to Lagos, and you will never see Chairman Kang again. No." The word came out stronger than Zuri felt. "No?" Her father's voice went dangerously quiet. "You're refusing a direct order? I'm telling you that I love him, and I won't be used as a weapon in your war anymore." For a moment, Chief Adetokunbo just stared at her. Then he smiled, and it was the coldest thing Zuri had ever seen. "Love. You think love matters? Let me show you what love gets you." He pulled out his phone and made a call. Spoke in rapid Yoruba that Zuri couldn't quite follow. Then he ended the call and looked at Min-Jae. "I've just ordered an attack on your eastern shipping route. 3 vessels. Estimated value. 200 million. They'll be at the bottom of the ocean by morning." Min-Jae went white. "You can't." "I just did. And unless you want more blood on your hands, you'll stay away from my daughter." "Father, please," Zuri begged, horror washing over her. "Don't do this. You did this." Her father's eyes were merciless. "You chose him over family. Now people will die because of your selfishness." Mrs. Kang stood. "This alliance is over. Any further contact between our families will be considered an act of war." She walked out. Chief Adetokunbo followed, pausing at the door. "You have 10 minutes to say goodbye to him, Zuri. Then Marcus will escort you to the airport. If you're not on that plane, I'll kill him myself." Then he was gone, and Zuri and Min-Jae were alone in the conference room. "I'm sorry," Zuri said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. This isn't your fault." Min-Jae pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "They set us up. Both of us. Those meetings with the Castellanos, I never had them. It's all fabricated. But why? Why destroy the alliance? Because they can't control us. Because we chose each other over duty. And that's more dangerous to them than any business deal." Zuri pulled back to look at him, drinking in his face like she could memorize it. "What do we do?" "If loving you ends me," Min-Jae said, his voice breaking, "I'll still choose it. Every time. In every life. I was born into war," Zuri said, touching his face. "You're the first thing I chose for myself. The first thing that's mine. Then we fight." Min-Jae's expression turned fierce. "We fight for this, for us. We find proof of the setup. We expose whoever's really behind it. And we burn down anyone who tries to keep us apart. That could take everything from us. I don't care about everything. I only care about you." Footsteps approached in the hallway. Their 10 minutes were up. "I love you," Zuri said desperately. "I should have said it before. I love you." "I know." Min-Jae kissed her one last time. "I'll find you. I promise. I'll find you, and we'll end this." Marcus appeared in the doorway. "Miss Adetokunbo, it's time." Zuri let herself be led away, looking back at Min-Jae standing alone in that conference room. She memorized him there, strong, defiant, refusing to break even as his world crumbled. The flight to Lagos was the longest of Zuri's life. She spent it, staring out the window, her mind working furiously. Someone had framed Min-Jae. Someone had manipulated both their families into destroying the alliance. Someone wanted them at war. Who benefited from the Adetokunbos and Kangs fighting each other? By the time they landed in Lagos, Zuri had a list. She spent the next week digging through her father's files, making quiet calls to contacts she'd cultivated over the years, piecing together the puzzle. What she found chilled her to the bone. The Castellano family, Italian mob with operations throughout Southeast Asia, had orchestrated everything. The fake meetings, the leaked photos, even the whispers about Zuri and Min-Jae's affair that had reached their family's ears. The Castellanos wanted the eastern shipping routes. With the Adetokunbos and Kangs at war, neither family could defend them. The Castellanos would swoop in and take control while both empires destroyed each other. Zuri tried to tell her father. Chief Adetokunbo refused to listen. "The Kangs betrayed us. That's all that matters." "Father, please, just look at the evidence." "Enough!" His hand cracked across her face hard enough to split her lip. "I should have known you'd defend him. Your weakness has compromised this family." Zuri tasted blood and understood with crystal clarity that her father would never listen. He didn't want the truth. He wanted war. He'd been looking for an excuse to destroy the Kangs for years, and Zuri and Min-Jae's relationship had given him the perfect cover. So she made a choice. That night, Zuri gathered every piece of evidence she'd collected. Files, phone records, financial transactions showing the Castellanos' involvement. She compiled it all into an encrypted file and sent it to 3 places. Min-Jae, an international crimes reporter she trusted, and her father's biggest rival within the Adetokunbo organization. Then she sent one final message to Min-Jae. "I'm sorry. I'm ending this. All of it." Before he could respond, before she could lose her nerve, Zuri walked into her father's office. He was there with his top lieutenants, planning attacks on Kang Holdings. "I sent evidence of the Castellano setup to the authorities," Zuri said calmly. "I also sent it to our allies, to the Kangs, and to the press. By morning, everyone will know the truth." Chief Adetokunbo went very still. "You did what?" "I exposed your lies, all of them, including the assassination attempt on Chairman Kang 8 years ago, including the drug trafficking you've been hiding from our legitimate business partners, including everything." Her father stood slowly. "You've signed your own death warrant." "Maybe. But I've also ended this war. The Castellanos can't hide now. You can't hide, and neither can the Kangs. Everything's out in the open. You've destroyed this family." "No, father. I saved it. You just can't see that yet." 2 of her father's men grabbed her. Zuri didn't fight. She'd known this was coming. "Lock her. In the south wing," Chief Adetokunbo ordered. "No one in or out. She's made herself a traitor." Zuri was dragged through the compound she'd grown up in, thrown into a room she'd played in as a child, and left there. Alone. Betrayed by her own family for choosing love over loyalty. But as she sat in that locked room, she didn't regret it. The truth was out. Min-Jae would know she'd fought for him, would know she'd sacrificed everything. That had to be enough. In Seoul, Min-Jae received Zuri's files and felt his heart shatter and rebuild simultaneously. She'd done it. She'd exposed everything, including her own father, to protect him. He spent the next 48 hours weaponizing that information. Sent it to allies, to law enforcement, to business partners who'd been kept in the dark about the criminal operations of both families. The fallout was nuclear. Chief Adetokunbo was arrested for trafficking and conspiracy to commit murder. Mrs. Kang was forced to step down from the family, business under investigation for her own crimes. The Castellano family faced international warrants. 3 empires collapsed in the space of a week. Min-Jae lost control of his company. Zuri's father lost everything. And somewhere in the wreckage, 2 people who'd loved each other disappeared. 5 years later, a woman named Ari opened an art gallery in a quiet neighborhood of Tokyo. She specialized in contemporary African and Korean fusion pieces. She lived simply, quietly, and told people she'd grown up in Lagos but had family connections to Seoul. One afternoon, a man walked into her gallery. He was Korean, handsome, wearing jeans and a simple jacket instead of the designer suits he'd once lived in. He stopped in front of a painting. Seoul and Lagos overlapped, 2 cities becoming one. "I've seen this somewhere before," he said. Ari looked up from her desk and her breath caught. Min-Jae. He turned, and his smile was like sunrise. Ari. Or should I call you Zuri? Ari is fine. I've grown to like it. Min-Jae walked toward her slowly, giving her space to back away. She didn't. "I've been looking for you for 3 years. I know. I've been letting you find me for the last 6 months. Why now? Because enough time has passed. Because our families are scattered and broken and no longer hunting us. Because I missed you more than I can survive." Min-Jae reached for her hand, and Zuri let him take it. "What we did, destroying everything, was it worth it?" "I don't know yet," Zuri said honestly. "Ask me in 50 years. "Deal." Min-Jae pulled her close, and Zuri let herself sink into his arms. Let herself believe, finally, that they might actually survive this. Some love stories aren't meant to be easy. They're meant to change the world. And sometimes, changing the world means burning it down and building something better from the ashes. If you made it to the end of this story, you've just experienced what happens when love becomes a weapon, when loyalty demands everything, and when 2 people decide that some things are worth fighting for no matter the cost. This is what Oyonel Afro-Korean romance is about. Stories that don't shy away from the darkness. Stories where love is earned through fire. Stories that leave you breathless and changed. Subscribe now so you never miss another episode. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and whether you think Zuri and Min-Jae made the right choice. And smash that like button if this story hooked you from the very first line. Because trust me, the next story will be even more intense, even more emotional, even more impossible to look away from. I'll see you there.